Hi, I'm Stacy Pingree, owner of Radiant Financial Group, and this is the Wealth Building Podcast, Legacy Wealth Building Podcast. We have a guest today that is amazing. I worked with him for a long time, a lot of years. His name is Beau Browder. He's a dedicated real estate professional. He was born and raised in Phoenix, Arizona, and he grew up immersed in his family's construction business, where he learned the values of hard work and exceptional customer service. Before transitioning to real estate, Beau honed his skills in sales and operations at Tesla. But after experiencing corporate life, he sought a more fulfilling path. I remember how you came to that. In early 2018, he made the shift to real estate full time and quickly established himself as a very trusted agent in helping hundreds of families to find homes. You've really he's really catapulted his business. In addition to his work and as a realtor, Beau actively manages a construction company, and he does property flips. He builds spec homes. He built his own home. He's completed lots of full-scale remodels and lots of renovations. He's got a keen eye for building equity through strategic home improvements, and he guides clients in creating lasting wealth through real estate. Beau, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yes, of course. Well, let's jump right in. I know that I would love to hear a little bit about your introduction into the real estate world, because I know you came, a little bit out of construction background and solar.
Yeah. So I grew up in a construction company. My dad owned a concrete company for 35 plus years and was a general contractor as well. So kind of grew up in that world and understanding what construction was like, and he was also real big on, you probably don't want to do this. Concrete is very hard. And so he was the one that kind of always pushed me to go do something outside of that scope. But, honestly, I saw him grow a business. I saw him, how he treated people, how he took care of people. He never really marketed and the whole entire time that I saw him run a company. So everything was kind of word of mouth. And, ultimately I tried to go into some medical stuff, hated that. I went into corporate world and, it just wasn't for me. I'm an HR nightmare. I curse too much. I say what's on my mind. Yeah, I say what's on my mind. I don't like the fluff that is the corporate world a little bit. And so I was in that. And honestly, what happened was I had a supervisor, one of the VPs of Tesla in the Southwest region. He pulled me aside at one point. He was like, "Hey man, I really think you are wasting your talents here." And he's like, "You have a gift that I think is just not really the most beneficial for you to be in this environment." And then I had another guy tell me the same thing that worked within the company, that was an operations manager. And then ended up meeting a guy on a bachelor party actually. And he came up and he was like, he said the same thing. And this was like 3 times within 3 months. He came up, he's like, "Hey, you should come work for me. You're wasting your gift."
Yeah.
And granted, it's a bachelor party. There's a little alcohol involved and everything else. I was like, all right, cool. That sounds great.
Yeah.
And then ironically, just randomly came back from the bachelor party. Like 2 weeks later, I ran into him again in a little dive bar, and he reiterated that fact. And that was like a Saturday night. And I was like, if you're serious, I'll do it. And
I'll see you Monday morning.
Yeah. So Monday morning I signed up for real estate school and I started the process, and then kind of chased that situation and finished the school. And, ultimately I had a situation with Tesla where they were restructuring the sales department, everything else. And I was just kind of like in a limbo situation, and they offered me a new position. And, the person I had kind of mentoring me in the situation was like, "You're going to get out of it what you put into it. If you go in half-ass, you're going to get half-ass results." And, so I called the VP guy that actually told me I was wasting my gift there. And I said, "Hey man, he's like, hey, don't worry, we have a job for you, blah, blah. There's people that got laid off and all this stuff that was going on," which that's another thing of the corporate world I hated. Yeah. And I said, "Listen, man, I think I'm done." I'm like, can I get a severance, and maybe you can give my job to somebody else who really wants it?" Yeah. And he was a little bit shocked, but I think he also was, he was like, "Good for you." And yeah, that's exactly what happened. So I got just enough money to basically live for 6 months. And I was all in, and I was like, I'm either going to, survive or not.
Ooh, I love it. Yeah, the all-in challenge.
Yeah, that was about the most nerve-wracking situation I've ever been a part of. And I took it pretty much down to the wire. I think I had rent due, I had everything due. I had like no money left to pay my bills, and I had 2 deals close at the same time. And thank God I paid the late fee for my rent, and haven't paid a late payment since.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
It's been good.
You've had an amazing So when was that?
That was 2018.
Okay, so
Yeah.
rise like all the way through now. Gosh, that's crazy. Time flies,
Yeah.
huh? So 6 years later, So I know that like we talked a lot. We've talked a lot about this, like this mindset shift, and it's really. I know you experienced it. I mean, I watched you go through it, but like that. Well, and even what you're talking about there is like getting the confidence to go out and say, okay, maybe there's something more that I can create, and as much work as I put in, I will actually get out.
Yeah, it was just hard in the corporate America. I think the better you get at your job, the better the corporation
Company
does,
does, yeah,
right? And so
yeah,
there was multiple times where we got very efficient. We had very efficient numbers, this and that, and they were giving us pay decreases because we were getting so good, right? Where I'm like, it's the only world I'm in where you get better at your job, you make less money.
yeah.
And that's where I
Wild.
just, and I was just unfulfilled. I wasn't happy. It was a good job. It's a very well-respected company.
Yeah.
You have stock, you have all the stuff that everybody thinks they want, and everything my dad was like, hey, this would be a better situation for you. And ultimately I like helping people. I like helping create value for people, and I like being around people and not having the same day every day.
Yeah.
And that was
Yeah.
like the biggest thing, was I just wanted days to be interesting.
Yeah.
Life's pretty short to go work a 9 to 5 and be miserable.
Yeah.
um
And you bet on yourself.
yeah, and you bet on yourself, and it does, when you do that, there's no other options,
Yeah.
and that's where I recommend people that do try to get in this industry. I'm like, if you're gonna do it and you're gonna try to keep your other job, you're just not gonna get it.
Yeah.
It's the scariest thing. Luckily, I didn't have kids. I had a fairly cheap 1-bedroom apartment at the time, and like I said, I sold all my Tesla stock right before it went up big time. But that funded me for 6 months, and I just knew, I was like, I have 6 months to figure it out.
Yeah.
And it took me 5.5 months to close my first deal.
Yeah.
So luckily I had
Take your
just
time.
enough, but yeah, it was like I said, I've never looked back, and it was the happiest I've ever been. It gives me the freedom to do things I like to do.
Yeah.
And then the construction stuff too is a way for me to still be creative, and I hate paperwork. I hate transactional stuff. So to be able to do things that are beyond just the regular real estate, buying and selling, like that kind of feeds that part of my brain that needs a little bit of creativity,
Yeah.
needs a little bit of a challenge. And and it also helps me stay in tune with what's going on, what are the trends, where are things progressing. And
Yeah.
and I think that's important, because you want to share that information with clients, because ultimately, like, that's what everybody wants to do, right? They want to put a little bit of money into their house, help raise its value, make some money, and continue to work your way up that real estate ladder.
Well, let's dive into that a little bit. Those are two different areas I want to talk to you about, because I think that there's a real and there's a real need. I mean, I see so many agents and investors and first time home buyer, like anybody that's looking at real estate. I see them not know how to gauge well, let me back up. Not know how to gauge a diamond in the rough. That's the one thing I kind of had to talk to you about, because we've done some deals together where, when we work together, the buyers have been like not able to see.
Yeah.
You work with so many people that are like not able to see the
vision.
Yeah, the vision
Yeah.
for what it is. And I think you are creative, and there is a lot to that you've got a great eye, and you've built your own home and designed your own space. And so
It's hard.
yeah,
It's
it
hard.
is.
And I didn't start there,
Yeah.
and that's where, even like kind of when I first started, obviously I didn't have any clients. I didn't really have anything to do. And like my mentor, I try to figure out where could I bring him value,
Yeah.
right? Where was he stressed out? And he was stressed out. He had a bunch of these little projects that were, stressing him out. So I'm like, let me take those on. I'll figure it out. I didn't know what I was doing. I was on YouTube and Googling everything. He's like, go get permits. I didn't even know where to start. I just went down to City Hall and I just walked around, like they passed me around, and I finally got the answer I was looking for. And so part of it is just figuring it out, like just problem solving. And that's really what 99% of this job is just kind of problem solving. But you just figure it out. And honestly, I didn't have anything else to do. It's like, what, you know what I mean? And he was like, hey, I'll pay you a little bit of money. Go figure this out. I'm like, all right, perfect. That's more money I'm making.
Yeah.
So I was able to keep going.
Yeah.
So I was able to kind of figure that out, where he could create some value. And then ultimately in return, I provided him some value. He provided me some insight, right?
Yeah.
Now that first situation, like I screwed up, one of the drawers didn't open because I designed the kitchen wrong, and like, so there was some, there was some mistake. There was a learning curve there, right?
Yeah.
And like, I didn't know what I was doing, but I learned from every mistake, and you just kind of figure that out. But what I really realized was that, like, for a lot of my clients, everybody gets on Pinterest, which is like, the best and worst thing ever.
Yeah.
But when I see things, when I look at values in the neighborhood,
Yeah.
where are things trending? What's going on in the neighborhood? And that's ultimately how like all the things I've found and picked up for myself was, I did an open house close by and saw the demand and this and that. So it's like, okay, I see there's a demand for this area. The values are increasing, this and that. But I look at like the non, like I call them the non-sexy items, right? So
Yeah.
the roof, the windows, like the insulation,
Yeah.
the AC unit, like the water heater, all that stuff. Like those are all big ticket, expensive items, and nobody ever pulls up to your house and goes, "Oh my God, that's a great looking roof." You know what I mean? Like,
Exactly.
or what SEER is that
Yeah.
AC unit? You know,
Yeah.
is that a 19 model? That's
Yeah.
beautiful. Like
Yeah.
nobody ever says that,
No.
right? So if I kind of look for people, I'm like, hey, if the roof is in good shape and like the bones are in good shape and the expensive items that you don't really want to spend your money on,
Mm-hmm.
then you can focus on the stuff that you see every day.
Pinterest.
And yeah, exactly. And the Pinterest stuff.
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
like, then you spend your money on things that you see, and ultimately like that's where people really appreciate it.
Yeah.
But those big ticket items are huge.
Yeah.
And so that's where I kind of explain to people like, hey, paint is easy. You can invite friends over, you can do paint. We have a contracting company. We give fair price on everything. I'm like, we can do all this stuff and you can spend $20,000-$30,000 and really make the home that you want and pick the finishes and the stuff you see and all like, ultimately too. And you're kind of going with trends, and that's the stuff that's going to help sell the house.
Yeah.
Or you buy the house and you got to spend $20,000 on the roof and the AC. It's like, then you're tapped out. So that's kind of where I value the windows, the roof, like, the big non-sexy items that are 100% crucial for a home. And then you spend your money on the stuff that you want to spend your money on.
Yeah.
And then just being smart, understanding, like it helps growing up in construction because you understand more about load bearing walls and, just certain things like that, and understand how a home is built. Because if you understand how a home is built, it's a lot easier to give reasonable advice on what to do with it.
Yeah, I've always thought that's so important. I mean, it just seems like you get into a situation where you guys get a Binzer back or an inspection item, inspection back, and it's just like
it's huge. People
deals,
freak out.
Deals die.
People freak out over the littlest thing, and some people just don't understand. Like, hey, this isn't a big. We can figure this out. It looks like a big item. It's not.
Yeah.
And that's just having experience in construction, which is very helpful. And I tell everybody, I'm like, if I sold cars, I would know how cars work. I would know everything about them, right? And I'm like, I don't know anything about cars. I can barely change my oil. But that's how I would be if I was selling that. When I was selling solar, I knew everything about solar.
And ultimately, you can get into these properties, and we sit here talking about wealth building. We can get into these properties and then be into a money pit.
Yeah, big time. And that's what you're trying to avoid. And especially, I do a lot of stuff in Central Phoenix and these different areas where. My big thing is like, hey, we got to scope that sewer line. We got, those are $20,000-$30,000 things that people don't really think of. And if you never replaced one, you don't understand the havoc that it can create depending where it runs and everything else. So those are all things that I try to get the big ticket items out of the way for people so they can spend their money on stuff they actually see, stuff that feels real, stuff that people appreciate, and ultimately will help sell the house in the future.
Yeah.
Because that's what's important. Obviously, they want to make money on it so they can work their way up. That's what, everybody's goal is, to kind of work their way up the real estate ladder and to ultimately to their dream house, because very few people, their first house is their dream house.
Home. Yeah.
That's just not reality.
That leads me. So that's a great intro to the next question too, is when you're talking to a client, I mean, we go through this all the time. Like I always say with my first time home buyers, and you and I've had first time home buyers together, and it's like, hey guys, and I love that we're in sync on this, because the first thing I say to them is, hey guys, this is not your forever home.
Yeah.
So let's be realistic. Let's make sure we can afford the payment. Let's even consider whether or not this is something we can rent out later on, right?
Yeah.
You and I are, but I mean, don't limit yourself today,
right?
With something like what opportunity for tomorrow, right? But I love that. So when you're talking to somebody about that mindset shift, how do you? Because I know it happened for you.
Yeah,
know this,
Well,
you built equity.
Yeah.
You built equity because you built a house, and that, of course. But also just even how you think about real estate now.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely shifted for sure. And it's trying to figure out, I look at things like, what are remodels in this neighborhood going for after they've been done? Like, what's their square footage? What's the value? Stuff like that. So, I bought a neighborhood that I wouldn't have bought in, but got a very good deal on the property. I knew that the demands were going up. I knew if I added square footage, I had to add at least 1,000 square feet to get to, I ran comps for the area. I'm like, okay, the ones that are 1,800 square feet or bigger are selling for this, when it's an older, neighborhood built in the 40s.
Yep.
So everything was built as 1,000 square feet, 3-bedroom, 1 bath. But I knew that there's some that have been redone. I saw the potential there. So I was like, if I got it for the right price and I put this much into it and I added this much square footage, that this is where I should be when I'm done. And as long as you do it right and you do the high value return items, which is, good windows, doors, insulation, like the stuff that's important, but then also just tastefully done.
Yeah.
Functional, how people live today. People live a lot different today than they did 10, 15 years ago. They're the living room in the front with nobody sits in, like that's kind of a thing of the past, right?
The little box rooms, all the
Right.
things.
So
Yeah.
it's like, you just have to understand, hey, how can we make this functional? How much work is it going to take? Is it even realistic? And then what's the end goal here? What are we going to refinance out at?
Yeah.
And that's what you need to figure out. And that just takes time. It takes reps. And like, once again, I designed my whole house based on other homes I walked in.
Yeah.
Like I with no experience, I still, once again, I tell everybody, I'm like, I really don't know what I'm doing 90% of the time. I'm just figuring it out, and that's really what kind of how everything's happened. It's like, but if you're not uncomfortable, you're not growing.
Yeah.
And so every property I bought in for myself, every single one I've closed, I go in there and they've all been dumps. Like I've never bought a nice move-in ready house.
No.
They've all been dumps for myself. And every single time I've walked in and borderline panic attack, usually get a 6-pack of beer and I sit there and I wonder to myself, what the hell did I just do? Can I do this? Can I figure this out? But when you put yourself in that situation, once again, it's kind of like the betting on yourself. I had 6 months to survive. When you do that, you really don't have any other choice.
Yeah.
You'll just figure it out.
Yeah.
And that's really what most of this job is just trying to figure it out. And nobody has all the answers, but if you have a good mentor and you have good people to rely on and people that can think outside the box and help you make it make sense, I mean, it's important. And so that's where I do think having a mentor when you get in this business is huge.
Yeah.
I think just somebody to bounce ideas off of, and somebody also do sometimes just to talk you down off the ledge, because there's times where, it's an emotional roller coaster, and that goes for me and for my clients.
You gotta have a lunch that includes a couple of drinks.
Sometimes it's 2 margaritas at lunch and you say, screw it, and you just call off the rest of the day and you figure it out. But that's happened many times. I remember my first deal was falling apart and, called, and he's like, hey, go to the bar. It opens at 11 and have 3 beers or whatever you got to do. Take the day, wallow in it. Tomorrow, come back and let's get back after it. And it's what I did. I knocking on the door of a Buffalo Wild Wings at 10:58, hoping they'll open. It's like shameful, but it's also just what I need to do at the time. And you just rebound.
I don't look. I mean,
listen.
I think it sounds fun.
It's just, but you just got to figure it out. It's just figuring it out. It's problem solving, and that's all this job is. And then just being smart, educating yourself on the areas, knowing what's moving, what's not moving. It doesn't take you to be a realtor to do that. Anybody with Zillow or anything can look and see what things are, where houses are moving, the neighborhoods that they're selling quickly. I think price point's important. Is it something that most people can afford, or is it that, kind of elevated luxury price point? And that's where, just understanding where you're at and where you think you can get realistic value.
Yeah, I mean, what do you think are the most important? I mean, right now in today's current market too, what do you think is I mean, I know, again, it goes back to each individual house, but I mean, what do you think is the most value add, when it comes to renovations and things like that right now?
It's tough right now. I mean, it's because of where things are at, rates and everything else. A lot of people are just getting in by the skin of their teeth.
Yeah.
Whereas, a few years back when I did my last house, it was like things were continuing to kind of going up. So you could buy it, you could sink a chunk of money into it, and you could do a refi at the end and get your money back out. It's a different world now, and it's a lot harder to do that. So a lot of people now are looking for a turnkey.
Yeah.
Right. And then they'll figure out what they can do for a value add down the road. It just depends on your mindset. Can you live in a project? Like that's a hard thing to do. I've done it multiple times. It's not fun living in a project.
Yeah.
I showered with no hot water for like 6 months.
Yeah.
That was before cold plunges were super cool. And, so that's a tricky thing, but it's also what you can tolerate, what you are capable of. I think that's all important right now. Value adds to me is, just understanding what the trends are, it helps. I have a girlfriend that is in the design world, and, so she also kind of plants that seed, like, hey, green's the color of 2025, right?
So you know how to stage.
So you know how to stage stuff. You know what works. You know what's getting popular. I follow a lot of designers in town. I try to figure out what is the next upcoming trends, where are things going, like. Because if you can get a little bit ahead of it, that really helps you, because now you're, by the time you put this in, if you're behind it, it's already out of style, and that's not helping your value.
You draw so much appeal then, because you're the one house that has like the things everybody
right.
wants. Yeah.
And making stuff cool, and cool stuff's not cheap, and cheap stuff's not that cool. So
no, exactly.
It's a hard reality, but you can also do things without spending a ton of money. You can do things yourself. YouTube is an amazing thing. Like
Yeah.
I mean,
Trainer YouTube.
yeah, I mean,
Yeah, I know.
I learned how to drywall on YouTube. I learned how, just doing things, not that I'm a good drywaller by any means, but like I just had to get through an inspection. I figured it out. Right.
Yeah.
So that's where it's like you can figure out a lot of stuff. There's a lot of things, a lot of resources now. You don't necessarily need a 4-year degree to go
Yeah.
do this. It's not, you just, I kind of come from more of the school of hard knocks, and
Yeah.
it's a little bit different, but I've learned from every mistake I've made because I usually had to pay for it.
Yeah.
And that's the best way for me to learn. I'm
Yeah.
not a good test
You
taker,
had to pay
book
for it
guy.
twice,
Yeah, I
usually.
paid sometimes 3 times. Yeah.
You
Yeah. So
know,
that's kind of the tough part is, that's the only way I learn is by paying for it usually, but I'll never do it again. And
Yeah.
then now, and what ultimately, like, that's kind of what I tell my clients, like, you're not really paying me for this transaction. You're paying me for the last 150 I did, that things went wrong, things went right, and everything in between that I learned from all those things. And like, so you're paying me for my experience in the last 150, not for this one.
Yeah.
And like, that's why when people are like, oh, well, we want to blow that wall out, I'm like, that's fine. It's not load bearing, but you're going to have to address the floor. And then there's becomes this domino effect that people are like, oh, I never thought about that.
Yeah.
So that's where just having a little bit of knowledge of how homes are put together really help you kind of give insight to clients, because everybody, it's like, we want to blow this wall out. I'm like, all right, it's,
Yeah,
they've
especially in
watched
some
too
of the
much
areas.
HGTV.
Yeah, I know. You're down in like, Central Phoenix area a lot too. I know that.
And that's, there's
a
like
lot of
those
old
homes are tricky. They're not like the ones that are built today. And so you have to be realistic about that. You got to usually pop up in the attic. You have to know what you're looking for. And that takes time, and that takes shadowing people. That takes asking a lot of questions. And that stuff took years. That's not like something I just figured out over 6 months, my first 6 months.
Yeah.
But if you can find somebody to shadow and that's willing to give you the insight, that education is so valuable.
Yeah.
I mean, I still to this day, like I can't tell you how much I appreciate and I respect, the people that I've learned from. And I've never, whatever they need, I'll do at any point, because I value them more than like a Harvard education.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Because it's like ultimately
on the job.
Yeah, it's on the job training,
Yeah.
but it's like
and coaching.
I would
we talked about this, coaching.
coach, and I would have spent a fortune to learn that from somewhere, and so it's important to respect and appreciate who you're learning from, and just take it all in. And everybody's way of teaching and doing things is not going to be your way.
Yeah.
But if you can take a little bit from everybody and make it your own, I think that's ultimately like what makes you succcessful, makes you a bit different.
I definitely think you've created your own niche down there. I mean, we so on the note of you and I've talked about like what are the things that are like, how can somebody get going today into like decide with affordability where it's at. High interest rates are high, prices have been high on homes. I mean, then if they're a great deal, maybe they need $30,000 or $40,000 worth of just facelift stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's not the big ticket items, just the facelift stuff, just to make it like what you really want.
Yeah, and that's where, and ultimately, I think right now people have to sacrifice a little bit.
Yeah,
you're not getting the dream setup. You're not getting. It's just but you're also not competing with 50 other offers.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah,
so it's like, hey, if you can eat it for a little bit and be like, okay, we're gonna live in this house. And once again, that's where I'm like, if the non-sexy items are done, then it's like, okay, save up some money. You wait for, like Bedrosian's tile has a big sale on this weekend, right? Mm-hmm. Like, and you just tell people plan accordingly. I have good friends of mine that built a house, and they bought stuff over the course of a year.
Yeah.
While they were preparing for it, everything, there was stuff in, they had a storage unit where if there was a good sale on appliances, and they knew they were building this house, and they were very early on the process, but they bought everything throughout the process. Also, at the end, they didn't have a $50,000 appliance package situation, this and that, right? But they bought stuff on sale throughout the whole process. They had a vision. They knew what they wanted to do. And like, that's where, to me, people getting in today, you just got to get in.
Yeah.
Because when things start to shift and you're waiting for these rates to come down or whatever, like at that point, you're going to be too late.
Yeah.
And then they're going to be competing with too many people. And then you're not going to get the deal you want anyways.
No, that's so true. And we say that, we talk about that all the time. I mean, just the best time to buy a house is always 5 years ago, right? Like when I say that's
God, I wish I bought 10.
Yeah.
Right. We all do.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm like, I wish when rates were at 2 point something, like you wish you could have bought every house.
Yeah. Why didn't I buy all these investment properties?
Yeah. And you would look like a genius today. But at that time, you didn't think things were going to do with it. And that's part of it is just, we're all on this ride together, and you just don't know how things are going to go.
So moving forward for people, I mean, getting out of those houses that they're in now where they've got that low rate. I mean, we're still seeing, I mean, are you having them to rent out the house? I mean,
it just obviously depends on their situation, depends on how much they need. But yeah, I take everybody's, situation differently. Like everybody's unique. How are they doing? Could they cash flow? What does that cash flow look like? Do they have enough money to go down on another house? They need to borrow from this one. so everybody's situation is different. A lot of people now I feel like are having to sell
Yeah.
just to put enough down on the next house to make the payment
Yeah.
affordable,
Yeah.
which is unfortunate because everybody who calls me, they're like, well, I have a 2 point. I'm like, stop there.
Yeah.
Don't
Can we
sell
keep
it.
it? Yeah. Can we
I'm
keep it?
like,
Yeah.
listen, I'll sell. I love to sell. That's
Well,
how
we'll
I
put a
make
home
a
equity
living.
line on that baby. And,
Yeah, that's where I'm like,
yeah.
dude, borrow it. That's the
Yeah.
cheapest money you're gonna get.
Yeah.
I don't think we'll ever see anything that starts in 2 in our lifetime.
Yeah.
So if you have something at 2 points, it's like just figure out a way. How can we hold on to it?
Yeah.
And I would love to sell your house. Don't get me
Yeah.
wrong.
Yeah.
I would do it all day long. But ultimately, I want what's best for my clients because that's growing up in a small business like my dad. Like he just took care of people.
Yeah.
He didn't try to get rich off one client because you'll never get rich off one client.
Yeah.
But if you take good care of people, then they refer you 10 other people. You will get wealthy over time.
Yeah.
It's just, but that's where you just give you give value to people. You be straight with them. You be honest with them. You do a good job. You
Yeah.
communicate to them and you make sure they're happy. And like the referral bit, I don't do a ton of marketing. I'm not big on social media. Everything for me, pretty much word of mouth.
Yeah.
And it's just that people trust me, and trust is like, that's the biggest thing. And I just consider, you get all people buy these leads off Zillow and this and that. And most of them are crap. I don't want to spend all my time doing that. Whereas I get a referral from somebody that, like, I got one guy called me the other day and goes, hey, so-and-so said that I have to use you, or, you know what I mean? Like, and so at that point I don't even have to, it's not even like an audition, right?
No,
And it's
no,
not, because
exactly.
I tell people all the time, like I go on 150 job interviews a year.
Yeah.
And then people are like, that sounds like a nightmare. I'm like, it can be. But when it comes from a word of mouth from somebody that they respect and trust, and they give you a high recommendation, the job is pretty much
Warm
yours, right?
referral
You're
is
just
always,
going in there just to try not to lose it instead of trying to get it. And that's where, like, to me, treating people good and making sure at the end of it, and sometimes that means me paying to get a house cleaned or whatever. And a lot of times it's coming out of your own pocket, but ultimately it leaves a good taste in somebody's mouth. And down the road, you'll get a phone call randomly, and that $400 you spent turns into a $15,000 commission.
So that's leading me right to my next thing. I love these podcasts because you're just, feeding right into it's so awesome to hear a level of professionalism. I feel like in our space around real estate, lending, I mean, where people take their job so seriously, you care so much about being that trusted advisor, being the person that you're getting warm referrals. That's your business. You're not paying. You and I've laughed about this. Like, we're not paying for any sort of extra marketing because you're just you're busy on referral only.
If you treat people really, really good, you don't really need to market like crazy. And it helps, but if you treat people great, usually they'll give your info out.
Yeah. And so you've had a niche. You've had a niche here. You're you were a baseball playing athlete.
Yeah, not very good, but a
well,
little bit. I was athletic.
Yeah, you're athletic.
Yeah,
You're still athletic, maybe.
Yeah.
Sort of.
Yeah. I have my moments when my back doesn't lock up,
Yeah.
I'm 35 now, so everything hurts for like 3 weeks.
Well, we know, I know you've had some clients and that that buy second homes here, that are athlete, type, travel a lot, they're gone a lot, and maybe this is a second home, maybe this isn't even their primary home. I know it's been kind of a niche for you, and I know why, right? Like, I know why, because your level of service and trust, and I get just the value that you bring too. But I know, I thought it was so creative and really nichey. I know you've been doing like a concierge almost level of service for some of these folks, and it's unique.
Yeah. And honestly, those guys, the athlete world is a unique world, and one, they don't trust anybody, and I know why, because everybody's trying to get something from them, and it's a tough kind of world to crack into. However, they trust each other.
Yeah.
So that's where it's like, once again, you take really good care of one of them and they tell one or the other two. It's like, all of a sudden these guys trust you, and I'm not trying to, because honestly, at the end of the day, I look at these guys where I'm like, we're all just human beings. They have a cool job.
Yeah, exactly.
That's it. That's the only difference. And honestly, I deal with some bankers and some C-level executives and stuff like that, and they're way easier to deal with, because they have all their finances in order, and there's not 5 people you got to deal with, and a money manager and the agent and this guy. And so it's like, they're not the easiest people to deal with, but at the end of the day, providing them quality service, they will pay for convenience, right? Like, cause these guys, I have some people right now that you're kind of speaking of, where the baseball people coming back from the season, and they bought a house and they wanted things done to it before they got back. And it was, so we tried to time it up where I could give myself a couple months to do a lot of things. It was outdoor shower, cold plunge, sauna, wanted a custom kind of office, a dig me room, and stuff like that. And, give me a few months, I can figure it out, right?
Yeah.
I have people for everything. We have good resources and that are affordable. And once again, that's also where, knowing what the client wants, but also they were to the point they're like, hey, we trust you. We know
Yeah.
you have a good eye. They've
Yeah.
seen the house that I built for myself. They've been to my house multiple times where they're like, we trust you. You know
Yeah.
what we're going for. Just, we don't know this stuff.
Yeah.
So just do what you do.
Yeah.
And that's also very nice that you can have that level of trust with somebody, and you also got to deliver,
Yeah. Yeah.
and we did, and they came home and they were extremely appreciative, and it's a very cool situation where it's, I felt like I was on a freaking TV show or something where, like welcome home
Yeah.
kind of thing. And
Yeah.
it was a cool experience for them and for me. And ultimately too, like I helping one of his teammates right now. And he was like, hey, they said that you were
Yeah.
incredible and that they came home and everything was dialed in and they just got to live, because ultimately these guys travel all the time.
Yeah. They want to
And
come
they're
home
away
to.
from their wife, they're
Yeah.
away from their kids. And
Yeah.
so the wife in this situation was like, hey, I just want it to when we're here, we have 4 months together.
Yeah.
He works out every day and this and that, but we have 4 months where we get to real spend quality time together.
Yeah.
So that's where she's like, I'll pay whatever, because those 4 months are so valuable to them. And when you're making good money, you realize no matter what, like time is the most valuable
Yeah.
thing.
Absolutely.
And no matter
Right.
how much money you have, you can't buy that. So that's really what ultimately they were like, hey, we just want it to be done and dialed in when we get there. And then, there's times where these guys leave and I'm like, hey, live in the house for this off season.
Yeah.
There's going to be things you like and you don't like. Make a note of everything. And when you leave, I'll get it all fixed. So the next off season you come back and it's all dialed in. And it's the perfect client for me because I have 6 months to kind of pencil them in wherever
Yeah.
I have slow spots.
Yeah.
And there's nobody home. It's really easy. It's really,
You got a
that's
key
all
unlock.
very
You're
nice.
going over to take a sauna. A little cold
Yeah,
plunge.
I might cold plunge sauna myself and get some measurements, and and so that's nice. But and once again, I'm not a house manager or a property manager or
Yeah.
anything like
Yeah.
that.
No.
But
No. No.
there's certain clients where you're like, yeah, I'll take care of your stuff because ultimately they take care of me.
Yeah.
And they give
No,
me a
the trust.
referral and they trust me, and
It's the trust. Yeah.
and that's the biggest thing is like earning people's trust is the biggest thing in this industry. It's why you've been so successful. It's really pretty much why I've had the success that I've had is, once again, I always go back to like, just, you're not going to get rich off one person.
No. No.
And people think that you're just going to open a door and you're going to, this is not selling sunset.
No.
You know what I mean? And I even crushed my girlfriend's dreams because I made her look up them on Zillow and to see that they really, most of them don't sell anything. You know what I mean? Like one girl in that show sold one house, like, and you're like, it's a TV show, right?
Yeah.
So like, you're not going to, they see these commissions like, oh, they're making $280,000 on this one. It's like, that's not.
Well,
That is real life for some people. That's not real life for most.
It's selling a lot of those high price deals, and you sell one every couple of years, maybe.
Yeah, those people don't move, and they're difficult too.
Well, and in your building, I mean, again, the big thing on a lot of this is built, establishing that trust, having it, but also you've built a nice big chunk of equity for yourself because of the fact that you did it yourself, and you're
Right.
helping them to do the same because you're fair. You're trustworthy in it. You come in, you add value to the homes, and you're helping them build equity, which then we want them to go buy more
talking
homes.
to their money guy actually, which actually was great, and which I haven't had that experience with a lot of the money guys.
Yeah.
Usually they hate real estate because they want all the money to
Yeah.
invest themselves, which I understand that, but he called me and was like, hey, I just want to let you know. He's like, you're the first agent. He deals with a bunch of different athletes and all different price points stuff. He goes, you're the first agent that's ever recommended that my client buy a house that's less, let you put a yard in, do this, do that, build equity and sell it. And because I explained to him, I said, listen, man, this is, if you make 500 grand off this house, it's no different than your team cutting you a check for $1 million.
Yeah.
Because that check, you're going to get taxed 50%.
Yep.
You got to pay your agent, all these other things. It's like, if you can build 500 grand equity in your house, and he was, my client's like, dude, I thought the more expensive house I buy, the more money you make. I'm like, that's true. But when you make 500 grand, tax free on this house and you roll it into the next house, you're going to buy a more expensive house in the next house.
Yeah.
You're going to be happy and I'll make money on every deal. I'm like,
yeah. Or you'll keep this one and rent it out.
but also,
and
I'm also just looking out for him because, it's some of these guys haven't made the big contract yet to where I'm like, hey, let's be realistic. And if things don't go great, you can still afford this and you're in a really good spot. And if they do go great, then we'll sell it. You'll make money and everything's good.
Sometimes
right?
stuff happens.
Yeah. I mean, I have, 2 screws in my elbow, it's like people get hurt. It happens.
Yeah.
So that's where nothing, and some of these, depending on what sport it is, not all contracts are guaranteed. So it's a tricky situation, but you just, once again, you just try to look out for what's the best interest of the people, even if they don't always see it that way. Yep. Ultimately, they ended up buying a house that was at the top of their budget and told me to, kick rocks in my idea. But The money guy called me and was like, "Hey man, like I appreciate that. That's the first time anybody's ever done
Yeah.
that. Nobody, no agent that any of my
Well,
clients have ever worked with has ever suggested doing
not
that."
so short-sighted, and yeah,
Yeah, and he was like, "I respect that." And he goes, "You have my trust." He goes, "They speak highly of you, and now I think highly of you."
that's good.
So
Yeah.
it's, and ultimately, once again, you're not going to get rich off one. It just takes a lot, and it takes being consistent for a long time.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
Of
I think
course.
you've hit all my hot points about what makes you so amazing, and what I think is so critical. What if you were going to give any advice to anybody right now? Trying to build out their wealth. I mean, I know you have a huge range of clients, but what would some of the advice be right now in this market, in this space? Like, what's your advice?
I mean, there is ways to find equity in homes. There are smart things you can do in homes. I think right now, like, there's a lot of people like Buffett and all these guys that talk about when everybody is selling, buy, and this and that, where it's like right now, like nobody's buying. So to me, I'm still looking to buy. I'm still trying to find stuff. And now I know some of these things aren't going to cash flow. Maybe I'll be lucky to break even.
Mm-hmm.
But when the rates come down and the values go up, I could do a cash out refi. It's like,
Yeah.
and that's where it's like sometimes it's not pretty while you're kind of making it work. And
But there
then
are deals out there.
there are deals out
Yeah.
there, and there's people that are desperate. You hear a lot of this subject to stuff and all of that and everything else, and that can get kind of complicated, but there are deals out there. There are people that are in some, dire spots, and you can hopefully provide some value to them and take them out of that situation. But I think there's a lot of deals to be had right now. You can go in, you can get closing costs covered.
Yeah.
You can do these things. Like I said, it may not cash flow. You might lose $100 a month or $200 a month. And if you can afford to do that for the next couple of years, I do see things coming back up. I
Yeah.
do see rates coming back down.
Mm-hmm.
What that timeline looks like, nobody knows. I don't have the crystal ball, but I do think that things are truthfully, I think there's some good things coming on the horizon. I think if you get in now, you'll be thankful you did, because
Yeah.
once again, it's like I wish 4 years ago I bought everything.
Yeah.
And now it's and I would have been strapped and I would have barely getting by like a lot of people are. But if you're not uncomfortable and you're not pushing yourself, you're not growing.
Yeah.
And
I love it.
that's kind of, to me, every time I'm uncomfortable, I know that there's something good's coming.
Yeah.
It just is scary as hell in that process, and there's probably a lot of beers to be drinking. So
That's the note we're gonna end it
yeah,
on, is
yeah.
that
I mean,
right
every
there?
time, yeah, it's usually a six pack and a little bit of, self-loathing, and then you figure it out. You dust your boots off and you get going.
I love it. I love it. Well, I thank you so
Of
much for
course.
being here
Thanks for
today.
having me.
I love having these conversations and opening up opportunities for people to get in and find a way to get into this market and start. So
It just takes time. It takes hard work.
yeah,
And that's it.
there's no
You're the
shortcuts.
hardest worker I've met. And other than your husband, I think you're like two hardest worker people I've met. And you have everything that people would consider successful, and you still work hard. So it's
Yeah.
like, to me, surrounding yourself with people like that are continuing pushing and growing and making you uncomfortable, that's the only way to kind of start working your way up to that next level. Because it's all scary.
It is. Yep.
Even no matter how big you get, it's all a little bit scary. You're always going to be a little uncomfortable.
Yeah, you got to put yourself out there.
Yeah, it's terrifying. Like being on a podcast. Yeah.
Podcast fun. Well, thank you so much. Thanks, Beau, for being here
Absolutely.
today. We are going to have all of Beau Browder's information in the links below, and all of his contact information. And I think actually we're going to try something on this one where we're going to post some before and afters, because he had such an amazing remodel with his or build with his own house. So anyway, watch for that too. So we'll see you out there. Thank you so much for joining us today.